जिंदगी में हास्य रस का बड़ा महत्व है, मेरा ये मानना है। नहीं तो सारे रंग बेरंग हो जाते हैं, और गंभीर बातें भी अगर हंस के की जाए तो उनका भार थोड़ा सा कम हो जाता है। And as we've been talking about this evening, that it's a privilege to make someone laugh. Now, be it through verbal communication or the written word, हंसना बहुत जरूरी है, राइट? एंड हम भी अब हास्य रस की ओर कदम रख रहे हैं विद परिंदा जोशी and Mehak Varun, who they say are hilariously ours this evening, right? So Parinda is a best-selling novelist and a screenplay writer, and she has published 4 novels, namely Life from London, Power Play, Made in China, and the recently released A House Full of Men. And her third novel, Made in China, should ring some bells because it was adopted into a feature film of the same name by Madak Films, starring Rajkumar Rao and Baman Irani. And she also co-wrote the screenplay for that. Good evening, Parinda, and thank you so much for joining us this evening. Lovely to have you with us today. And in conversation with her, picking her brains for this conversation, is our moderator, Mehak Varun, who's the recipient of the 100 Inspiring Authors of India award in Kolkata. And she's also the author of 4 books, including the Human Quest series and also I Am Me. And she's known for raising contemporary issues in the society. And with that, I can surely say that she is a woman of influence. Thank you so much, Mehak, for doing this for us as well. And I guess it's over to you now to take it forward.
Thank you so much, Niharika. Hello, everyone. I welcome you to Literati 2021 in a beautiful session named Hilariously Yours, the recipe for a delightful read. Writings are truly magical as they take you for a journey within yourself. In words of Margaret Atwood, a word after a word after a word is power. And when this power takes a blend with humor, it becomes a magical wand that touches your soul and tickle your funny bone. Humor is an icebreaker. It relieves the pain and transforms the way people look at the world. With me today is one such author who writes brilliantly, makes us feel the depth of an issue, still letting us relax with her quirkiness and charm. Welcome, Parinda. It's an honor to have you here with us today. Thank you for joining in from San Francisco.
Thank you, Mahek. Thank you so much for such a lovely introduction and those amazing words from Margaret Atwood. They did quite resonate well with me, and looking forward to this wonderful session with you.
Yes. Uh, to be very honest with you, I have been digging deep into your social media handles to know you as a person more, and I could make out that you are not a very emotional person. On the other hand, I am a very emotional person, so I write to let my emotions go.
Mm-hmm.
You are a more of a happy-go-lucky person.
Mm-hmm.
Still, when you write stories, you feel the emotions. How did writing become so special, that they bring the emotions in you?
So writing it's been a very long journey for me. I remember being fascinated by words around middle school. Long before that, I think I had, and this is something I've inherited from my father. He has quite a knack of storytelling, and I think that's something that I inherited from him, thankfully. So I would, dramatize a lot of day-to-day events and add a ton of spices and just make it more exciting for people. And it was just, something that I did subconsciously always. And I realized that I was doing it when one day, as a child, my father was warning, our family and friends to apply a large reduction factor to all my stories because he's like, most likely a lot of them are made up. And I'm like, wow, that's quite something. I, of course, took it as a compliment, being a child. But that kind of stayed with me that, um, truth as it were was boring to me. I really like the dramatized version of it. So there was that aspect of storytelling. And then came written word. I was reading a lot of P.G. Woodhouse and a bunch of other books during my middle school years, and I thought and there was a lot of humor and wit in those, and it made me laugh. And I'd spend hours with the dictionary looking for unique words. Stringing along the sentences to create something. And that journey, of course, lasted for the longest time. It still has continued. But as a child, I didn't know how to go about, or when I was growing up, I didn't know if there's a certain part to being an author. I didn't know any authors personally. There were no role models around me. And so I just did the tried and tested route, and I went the computer science route. I have a MBA in marketing. But that latent desire always remained. And when an opportunity presented itself, I then took to blogging, etc. And when an opportunity presented itself, I wrote my first novel and I haven't looked back since then. So writing has always been, it's taken, it's affected me in different ways. Even after so many years, I continue to be amazed at how it allows me to explore my internal landscape. Yes, I'm not very emotional. I don't, and by that I mean that I don't dwell on situations, less than ideal situations if they've happened in the past. I quickly move on. I move on from strength to strength. But when it comes to writing, if your characters are moving on so quickly, there's nothing to latch on to. And so my first novel was more lighthearted. It was just a fun romp, as a part of various writers group. I still am. And this was one of the most valuable feedback I'd received, that you really need to dig deeper. Every person is capable of those emotions. And when you start digging deeper, it doesn't matter. I don't take myself too seriously, and a lot of us are like that. And it doesn't matter if that's the case. We all have enough to tap into. And if you just explore that, if you allow yourself to feel vulnerable, you will find at the bottom of that there's a lot of emotions that can transform you. And those are exercises I've done, I still do. And that's how I think that's what I've been adding to my characters.
No, that's very true. And I think also everybody's fathers are the one, who make you who you are. So that was
Yes,
a great answer.
he does
Yes.
have a big role to play.
Yeah. So also, your inspiration behind your stories, they come from women. So in your style, how do you perceive the idea of feminism in today's society?
There are, I read a lot of, and I hear people speak, there's a lot of different interpretations of feminism in the postmodern world. I think the definition is still basic and the same for all of us. It's just about equal rights and equal opportunities for everyone, not just women. In the Indian society, especially where I grew up, it had an additional dimension to it, which is that I'd seen casual sexism all around me. If you're part of the urban India with educated, progressive people around you, then it's not administered to you in such a stark way, where it feels like you just denied fundamental rights. That's not the case. But it's something that I brought in my book, A House Full of Men too. That Kittu, my protagonist, lives in with a progressive, educated family, but she still feels like she's denied fundamental rights in that. She is gainfully employed, but the family doesn't allow her to spend her own money, because the grandfather's like, what good are four men in the house if you have to spend your own money? And I just use that as an example, but what I mean by that is, under the veneer of love or protection or sheltering, a lot of young women are not allowed to explore, pursue their own paths, to make their mistakes, to live life on their own terms, just because the families are so protective of you. And I think that's just an example. Does it fit the typical definition of feminism? No, some might argue that it's very first world, but I'm just giving this as an example to say that it's not just about, what a typical example of feminism might come to mind, where women in rural areas, for instance, are not allowed to complete their education or not allowed to be gainfully employed. It's not just that. It You see it manifest itself in various ways across the world, regardless of what society you're a part of. And so that's, I think, the fundamental issue, that it's not what people are, families like, in urban Indias might think that they're allowing the daughters to, they're very progressive, allowing their daughters everything, but the daughters might have a different viewpoint. And it's really, have for an individual to have all the opportunities that they want to pursue. It's not what the society wants, things, deem fit for them, which is what it boils down to.
Absolutely. It's mainly about respecting each other's thoughts.
Correct.
Yeah. So this became a little heavier topic. So coming down to hilariously yours, I read somewhere that at one point you wished to be a stand-up comedian as well, and then eventually you're working as a working in a fashion startup, and then writing, and that too humor. So
Mhm.
how did all this take shape?
So, I mean, I worked in LA for in the entertainment space for a while. I worked in sports and music industry, and now I work in fashion. So I think it's I've always worked in the technical field. The industries keep changing, but I've always kind of worked in technical fields for a while. As far as stand up, I think that was a passing thought, but I've always been drawn to humor. Through writing, through various forms. I consume it largely through many different forms. I used to be a very regular at stand-up shows in LA, especially. I've seen everyone from perform from Jay Leno to Seinfeld uh, to Aziz Ansari, and when you're regular at shows, that thought invariably crosses your mind of how you might be. I've never tried it. I might someday. It's on my bucket list. Humor, like I said, it's something I've always been drawn to in terms of reading, in terms of consuming via comedy shows or specials or movies, just various art forms, and it's an integral part of my life because I thrive on it. I have a very large appetite for entertainment, and I take very long to write books. Every book takes me about 3 years plus. And so if I have to live with those stories and those characters for that long, they better entertain me. And so that's how I channel that. It does get channeled because now that you mention it, it just hit me that one of the characters, Karthik, in the book, he owns a startup, but he does, to make friends, new friends in the city that he's just moved to. He does try open mics, and so I've channeled a little bit of that, of how I might experiment with that through him.
That's beautiful. Coming back to your latest work, A House Full of Men, I would love you to tell our viewers, what the novel is all about.
Absolutely. Let me show you a cover or the copy of the book first. So that's a house full of men. It's a gorgeous
Cover
design.
is very creative, yes.
Uh, Recently published by HarperCollins India, and it's about a girl. There's a shoe rack at the back and stuff just falling all out, and it's very visually representative of how a girl might feel in a house full of men. House Full of Men is a dysfunctional family drama. It's a story of a 25-year-old girl, Kittu. She lives in Lucknow. She works for a travel magazine, but owing to situations in her life that have made superstitious about travel, she hasn't been able to travel in over a decade, which is the irony. But she's got far bigger problems. Grossly, she's grossly outnumbered by men at home, and there's a whole cast of men that she lives with. There's the head of the family is the cantankerous grandfather called High BP by the grandchildren, just because his wacky sense of humor causes high blood pressure in people. Then there are the continually nonsense spouting college going twin brothers who give her a hard time. There's a ravishing single father who's caught up between these two groups of men. There is the male puppy. He's called Bob Twain because they think he has a literary bent, who's the poster child for male privilege. Then there is the poster of PG Woodhouse, who, in a frame in her bedroom, who gives Kittu quirky advice when she's feeling low. And then there's the love interest, the current boyfriend who needs to be the ex, the forbidden fruit who needs to be the current. So the book, as the title suggests, or her life, as the title suggests, it's full of men. This is a progressive, educated family that she lives with. There's a lot of issues she's dealing with. One of that I touched upon, that she's subjected to casual sexism. She's also dealing with the guilt of being the cause of her mother's death. But she keeps it all bottled up, and when she hits breaking point, there's no one to comfort her because she doesn't trust this man to understand her. And I think a lot of it is subconscious biases and prejudices that we live with. That we feel like a lot of times in our lives, we feel like we're grossly misunderstood, and therefore, that we'd rather deal with it
Okay.
ourselves than to share it with a larger group of people. And so that's what the book is about in a nutshell.
Yeah, I guess there was some network issue.
Were you able
Now
to?
is it fine?
Yes, yes, I can see you move.
Yeah. Okay. So, as the story says, that, I personally felt this is not a very, this has deep meaning inside the story, because Kittu, whenever she had that perception, whenever she goes out, some mishap happens, she lost her mother. So, personally, I felt that this thing, it is little deep. It's a deep thing to, really go take the step down, but still you managed to make it such a light-hearted and fun-loving book. So
Mhm.
how does humor hold such an important place in your writing, even in making such, such serious topics? You can take it so lightly and help the reader to, take it, have a good laugh on the reading, even such heavy things. So how does humor hold such an important place in your writing?
I think it's just an extension of how I deal with situations or tough situations in my life. I'm not a very controversial person. I'm I don't dwell on things that hurt me too much. And when I do have controversial opinions or thoughts, I try to serve them with a side of humor. And I feel that's why humor is important in writing, in serious writing especially, because it makes the subject, it breaks the tension even for your characters as well as for the readers or viewers. It makes a subject more palatable, especially for controversial subjects or subjects that are have that lingering heaviness about them. It instantly breaks it up. It has a wider resonance with people. It connects them to readers or audiences. It breaks the tension, and it also makes the work more memorable. We've seen these examples in movies all the time. I think there's a movie that just released. I was reading about it in the papers. Chandigarh Shiki, I think, which is
Yeah,
about a straight man who falls in love with a transgender woman. Now that is something that would be considered a taboo subject in our society.
yeah,
And haven't seen the movie yet, so I'm just telling you from what I've read that by making it more commercial and by including more common tropes, you instantly make it more accessible and then it becomes mainstream topic of conversation. And I think a lot of these things, however we can, we as authors, we owe it to ourselves because we do have the privilege and the platform, and we owe it to ourselves to bring subjects that, uncomfortable as they may be, to bring them, to have it in the mainstream media as a discourse. I would like to add that I don't add topics just because they need to be talked about, just because they're the hot button issues. They have to be very organic to the story. They have to be innate to the characters. There has to be an arc. And I'm glad a lot of those issues like parent remarriages or teenage angst, body shaming, etc., have made their way organically into the book. But again, it's not something you would immediately catch on to. It's more the free flowing lightheartedness of it all that you might, that's the first emotion you might feel, and then later grasp that yes, there was more to it. Just exactly how I like to consume content, and therefore that's how I write as well.
no, that's perfectly said, because past 2 years during the COVID times, I think humor was one thing we used to watch on TV as well to make us, calm down. So I think this is a great thing which you are doing, making people have a good laugh and a very happy, healthy read. So that's a
Thank
great
you.
thing you are doing. Yeah.
Thank you.
So do you have any particular, humor writers whom you look up to, or anyone who's your favorite?
Yeah, I think Upmanya Chatterjee is one of my most favorite. He doesn't write comedy, but there's different types of humor in writing too, right? And we'll come to that. He's one of my favorite authors. His book English August was arguably the reason I became an author. When I read it, I was so mesmerized by his charming wit and his saucy wit, his it was such a delightful read, and it wasn't your quintessential funny book at all. But I was just so blown away by it. I've read it multiple times, and I think that was the reason I became an author. And I've read all his work, so Upmanya Chatterjee is definitely one. Some of the contemporary funny writers, and again, these are not mainstream haha funny. It's funny in a way. It's more intellectual funny. but I love Manu Joseph's work. Serious Men was one of his books that I really like. Anis Salim also doesn't write funny, but he's got a lot of witty stuff in his writing, so I like his work. Of course, Anuja Chauhan, I'm a big fan. Twinkle writes really funny stuff too. So, um, yeah, these are kind of the authors I read, look up to.
Right. And you were talking about types of humors, in different styles. So, what is your style? How do you perceive that?
Yeah, so there's multiple types of humor. Whether you're performing, so whether it's uh, whether you're performing so long form, short form kind of improvisation on stage, or whether you're writing, there's various types of comedy that you can use multiple tropes. So one is self-deprecating. A lot of stand-up comedians do that. They draw upon experiences in their past and then just make fun of themselves. You don't take yourself seriously, and therefore you laugh at yourself, and people will laugh at you. I love that kind of humor. I just read this poster in my gym that says that life is too short to be taking yourself seriously all the time. So if you can laugh at yourself, call me. I'll laugh at you. And and that's something I've kind of followed. I just read that poster. So self-deprecating is definitely one. Then there's more observational. I think that a lot of writers resort to, and that's Twinkle's a master of that, and that flows in my writing too. There's a time when I pre-COVID, I'd sit at parks or the malls or coffee shops with a little diary, and I always tap into people's quirks or note down funny incidents or episodes or things, and then incorporate that in my writing. So observational is a very important one for most writers. Even
Yes.
if it's not humor, just observational work, but in comedy, it's even more important. Then there's the wit and the wordplay that, like P.G. Woodhouse was a supreme master of it. All his work have such delightful, wit in it. So then there's that. There's more topical stuff like Saturday Night Live. If you've seen that, they just draw upon topical events. There is dark humor, which I like. So my Made in China was dark, and dark is stuff that's generally taboo, but then you bring it to light in, by dealing it in a funny way. So I think those are the five kinds of humor that I play around with. Then there is improvisational. Uh, there's physical humor, like a lot of slapstick stuff, mimes and stuff. You see gags in movies, right, where the central character is always stumbling over. You see it in rom-coms a lot. There's a lot of physicality. And then the absolute worst kind of humor that I personally don't like is bathroom humor or toilet humor. Those are just the jokes that I stay away from. So I think that kind of encompasses all broad categories.
So, do you think, Parinda, that everybody has that humorous aspect in them, or can everybody cultivate that? For example, if I take myself, for example, I'm more of an emotional person, more of a person, who's a deep thinker, more
Mhm,
on a serious side of the life.
mhm.
So, do you think, as a like me as a person, I can cultivate that humorous aspect in me? What's your take on that?
Absolutely. If you wanted to, then so I don't know if you can grow a funny one, right, so to speak.
Yeah.
But we our thoughts are an amalgamation of things that we're exposed to, right? And you can see, you can, if you had an eye for it, you can look at the lighter side of things. So there's multiple it's all about your perception at the end of the day, right? And you train your mind to look at the funnier side of things. It's not hard to do. There's so that's just on a day-to-day basis. But for somebody who wanted to delve into, let's say, humor writing, luckily we live in a world now where countless resources are available to us: online courses, coaches, writing groups, etc. So many books. I have a lot. I do a lot of self-study. I've taught myself a lot over the years, where it's a craft of fiction writing or screenplay writing or whatever. I've taken multiple courses on humor too. I I'm a part of masterclass. So I listen to a lot of writers speak, like established writers speak, and so there's a lot of like simple exercises you can do, right? Let's say you pick up one headline from today's newspaper and try 20 different ways of creating a joke out of it. It's something that people on Twitter do quite a bit, right? When something as simple as a Twitter CEO resigns, you'll see countless. If you search that, you'll see 100 different jokes made on that. And these are people, regular people, who have become Twitter comedians by just
Yeah.
experimenting with the headline and adding their own unique take on it. So it's training your mind to do that on a regular basis. But anyone can cultivate a funny bone if they give it the right mindset.
Yeah, I think I'll try on that, though it's very tough for me. So yeah. So next would be film adaptation. You are a novelist as well as a screenplay writer, right? Your book made in China, so it made into a film. It was made into a film. So, what pros and cons do you see in both the styles?
Yeah, so there's been this debate on the geek circuit for the longest time on whether books are better than the movies they inspire or not. And I think the jury's still out on that because we've seen countless examples on both sides. I think both mediums are wonderful. Books are great because they allow a reader to explore the characters mind. With books there's more detail, there's more character development, there's more depth, whereas the great thing about the movies are their ability to show and the overall experience of watching one. Books allow a reader to tap into the characters' mindsets, employ their own flights of fancy. um, Adaptations are a director's interpretation of a writer's work, and they're both potent in their own ways. I think for a writer to be a part of both mediums early on, especially for a novelist, can be exciting but confusing also, just because writing a book is such a solo endeavor, right?
Yeah.
It's a very lonely process, and then with screenwriting, because it's for a larger medium and it's mounted large, there's a lot that goes into it. And the first time around is obviously there's a very steep learning curve, but a lot will be added to your story if it's missing. For instance, additional characters or subplots, or um, you know, eventually the tone, the pacing, the sequencing, the dialogues can all change, and sometimes even the direction of the movie can change. So at the end of the day, the apple can fall really far from the tree, and it's just how things are. Just because it speaks to people, in movies speak to people in a different way than a book does, and so there's prerequisites to it that a novelist would need to learn to be able to fully grasp how to do that. So with Made in China, I feel really blessed that I didn't grow up watching many movies. I'm very far removed from Bollywood, or I was until it happened. So one minute I'm watching these big stars on TV, the other minute I'm with them on the sets, talking about stuff. It was quite a surreal experience. And of course, I've taught myself screenwriting over the past couple of years too. I just finished a screenplay that has been recently commissioned. So it is a journey, and novel writing and screenwriting are like chalk and cheese. Essentially an entirely different art form needs to be learned for a novelist who wants to delve into screenwriting.
So both have more of pros, right?
Yeah, yeah. Well, you just have to. The con is that it can take you by surprise the first time around, because there is you don't know what goes on when your book is adapted. It's with novel writing, you have complete creative control. When your book work gets adapted, a lot of times it depends on your contract. You may or may not be a part of the writing group. I was, but even then there were three other writers. It's like having five different co-pilots in a cockpit, right?
Yeah.
The opinions are flying all around, and it's hard to find consensus. The creative calls are different. Aesthetically things can look very different at the end of the day. So and because there's so many people involved, um, and I'm just saying in general, right, from the producer's vision of your work to the director's vision of your work, then product can be very different from what you had visualized or not. Again, it depends.
So you are doing a great job being a novelist as well as a screenplay playwriter. So these are two different poles
Sure.
apart things. So
Right.
doing a great job again.
It's okay.
There's a thing I truly believe that stories we tell also tell us.
Mhm.
So how relatable your novels are to your real life.
I think that they say that the first novel is sort of autobiographical, and then from that point on, because there's only so many stories you can tell about yourselves, and I think that is partly true. But at the end of the day, our work is an amalgamation of, our imagination, our experiences, our exposure, stuff that we read. And I think my past few novels have been just that. My first few novels, Life from London and Power Play, came about because I worked in entertainment in Los Angeles for quite some time, and so I was very privy to backstage stories about musicians and sports stars. Life from London was about a young Indian musician against the backdrop of the British music industry. Power Play was about the acquisition of a fictional IPL team, again because I worked in sports and had seen a lot of acquisitions gone through. Made in China was based, yeah, it's this quirky comedy that was based on a newspaper article I had read. And then I'm a Gujarati, Gujarati entrepreneurs are all around me. And so I married some fiction with some, real life stories I had heard. And then lastly, House Full of Men is because many years back, um, early on in my career, when I had to once make a presentation to the leadership team, I'd walk into a conference room and I'd seen 14 men seated there because that's how the board was at the time for that company I worked for. And this all, 14 men, all in their 50s, mostly white. And I felt like I was being set up. I'd frozen for a second, and I'm like, wow, there was a boardroom full of men. And that became my story for a while. It stayed with me, and I'm a big fan of dysfunctional family genre. So I kind of married the boardroom full of men to that, change it to house full of men. So again, it's all, it's a part of experiences that you've had or thoughts you've had that you develop upon. They're not essentially your stories, but somehow they trickle in. I have close ties to Lucknow, and so this novel is set in Lucknow. A lot of it is things that I've experienced or heard about, etc. So they of course definitely add to your story, your setting, or your dialogues.
Right. We don't have much time left, but I would like to ask you last question. Like you said that your latest book, it's about Kittu who lives in Lucknow. So
Yes.
you are staying in a different country, right?
Uh,
But your stories are based on cities based in India. So
yeah.
how do you manage the authenticity factor in it?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I feel like the world is flat now, and
Yeah,
the internet is a great enabler of it. So we're it's and I always joke that I live in Silicon Valley, which is mini India. It's more India than India itself sometimes. uh, it's so funny. I'd gone to Hyderabad. The team had taken me to the best biryani house there, and it was so amazing. I called the chef to compliment him, and he said, "Ma'am, if you like this, you must try our branch in Silicon Valley. It's even better." I'm like, "What are the odds?" So really, I'm very Indian at heart. My disposition is very Indian. My kid's been born and raised here. She still learns Kathak, and she still can recite
that's
a
good.
bunch of, she can recite Gayatri Mantra and, Hanuman Chalisa and all that stuff. So there's, I have a lot of Indian friends, a lot of Indian colleagues, and their stories, stuff that I consume, kind of all keeps it all real for me and keeps me grounded. Um, I'm a very people person. I have a gazillion friends and extended family in India, and so those conversations keep trickling, I think, and it just, it's very me, and so I don't think that ever is a challenge.
Basically, roots, they never change. They are the
Yes,
real you. So
correct,
yes,
exactly.
yeah.
And it
So
helps
it
that
was
there's billions of us around now.
right, true. And Indians, I guess, they are everywhere, and they have a mark everywhere. So that's the best
Exactly.
part.
I have never been to a party where I'm not run into an Indian across the world.
Yeah,
So it's we're all over, and that helps.
right, exactly. And thanks to this internet, we have been able to have you live from San Francisco. Otherwise, we would not have been able to interact with you. It was a very lovely interaction, Parinda. It was great talking to you and learning from you how to have that art of humor, even on the serious issues and on the very heavy subjects, which you feel that, you can't take this anymore, but still you make it so lighthearted and so humorous for our viewers, for us. Thank you so much for that. It was very nice talking to you.
Thank you so much for such kind and lovely words, Mehak. You are a fabulous host. I had the greatest time. I don't. It's not even, the sun's not even risen yet, and I feel like I've already had a wonderful Saturday. Like it's been
That's a
like
nice
conversing with an old friend. So thank you so much for such a sparkling conversation, and really happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. That's such a nice compliment. Thank you so much.